Thank you so much, Mr. MacDonald. I'd like to call upon Mr. Douglas Murray, author and journalist, to make a speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Royal Holloway and the Society and Society involved for inviting me to speak to you. It's a great pleasure to be here and see your beautiful campus. I've got an idea already from the opening applause of what most of you think. But after all, this is a university, so we're not here to talk about propaganda, but to talk about facts and ideas and history, and I hope we can do so. The motion itself tells you everything you need to know. Are we too critical of Israel? What other country would get this crowd out tonight if we had it in the title? Syrian government, just hours ago, sent its own troops in and massacred people in a mosque in Syrian territory. But would you have a motion here? Well, Holloway got you all out on a pleasant Wednesday evening. Are we too critical of Syria? No. No, I'm fairly sure we wouldn't. Saudi government's just been pimping out its own troops to the government of Bahrain, and gunned down the people of Bahrain streets. Would you come out to discuss, are we too critical of Bahrain? Are we too critical of Saudi? No. Because international efforts, led by propagandists, at the moment seek only to demonize one nation in the world, and that nation is Israel. It's a huge irony that Israel is and remains the country in the Middle East, which is a country that I would submit most of you and I would want to live in that region. The only one that secures genuine freedom of worship. When I was there last few months ago, I say we've had to do propaganda with facts. When I was last there a few months ago, I wanted to visit again the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. I've been trying for some time to visit it on a visit to Israel. I can't go because Israeli troops won't allow in non-Muslims to visit at the request of Muslims who don't want non-Muslims in a Muslim site. I would submit there's almost no other country in the world whose troops stop atheists getting into a religious site at the request of a religion which many people in this hall and others will think Israel is somehow opposed to. Israel defends the religious rights of its people in a way which none of its neighbours do. It defends the rights of other minorities. It's the only country, I can tell you, in the region which you'd want to be in if you were gay. It's the only country in the region which is a safe, genuine democracy. There are attempts to have others elsewhere. Somebody said on the other side earlier about the intentional killings that go on. Now look, I would just ask you in as fair a way as possible to consider the following. Do you think that when Israel tries to defend itself, as any country coming under routine rocket barrage would, as Israel tries to defend herself, if you look at the military hardware that Israel uses, the military technology it uses, the expense of its own troops and civilians that it is willing to go through, does it seek to kill as many people as possible, or as few? I can tell you there isn't anyone who isn't a propagandist who wouldn't agree that the military technology that Israel uses, it tries desperately on every occasion to minimize any casualties. The perfect bomb for Israel is, as it always has been, a bomb which takes out the terrorists that it seeks to take out. The perfect bomb of Israel's enemies is a very different thing. It seeks to maximize casualties. That's the bomb I did earlier today in Jerusalem. It seeks to kill as many people as possible, maim as many people as possible. The difference between these two things cannot be ignored. It is the difference between trying to limit human suffering and trying to maximize it. And if on a campus like this, this can't be said without jeering and heckling, then I think we have a problem. I want to finish by saying one other thing. There is a serious problem in campuses and in this country with the rhetoric, among others which you've heard already tonight from the other side. Professional whippers up of hatred against the state. I think that hatred will lead to genocide. Israel is a country that has been built in the wake of genocide, and forgive me for mentioning the fact, but it is very sensitive to people calling for its annihilation. It sees that from the government of Iran, not just the president and the supreme leader, but from almost every neighbouring state. It is not nothing when your neighbours say that they want to annihilate you. You have to take it seriously, and I submit Israel has the right to do so. Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Murray for his speech and call upon Mr. Samet Habib.
There has to be a kind of coverage, okay, about what is happening in Palestine. When we see those media outlets, the big media agencies and sources, they will cover it, but we have to look at the terminology. What kind of terminology is used? It's always beside the Israelis. It's always.
Thank you. Mr. Douglas Murray, what will be your answer?
Thank you. If I just very firstly just pick up on the point that was raised by gentleman on the side, man from the side. I think we would have to look quite hard to find another debate. I think it rather proves the point I was making in my opening comments. You have to go quite hard to find a debate on international affairs where one of the people who was speaking to an audience of academics thought that it was a good idea to claim that his opponents were in the pay of a foreign government. But that was the immediate instinct of my opponent. That was the immediate instinct of my opponent here tonight, because I mentioned I'd been in Israel. Well, I just got back from Morocco yesterday morning. Perhaps I should have mentioned that and sent him into a real conspiracy tailspin. He didn't allege if I had talked about my travels in Iraq or Jordan or Lebanon or the West Bank or anywhere else. He wouldn't have alleged, I wouldn't have thought that I'm in the pay of, say, the PA or Jordanian government or the Iraqi government or anyone else. No. But that's because you see there the fetid conspiracy mindset at work. And this is important. He referred to the fact, he said it's very difficult to say certain things about Israel. It's very difficult to say certain things about all of this. I think it's rather difficult for you. I think you have to be careful about what you say, as you showed when you referred to the murder of that family as a military operation. To get to the question, yes, obviously there's a problem for media. And I'll explain in the simplest, straightforward terms as a reporter. When you report from free democratic countries like this one and like Israel, you can say whatever you want. You really can say whatever you want. The Israeli court system has just imprisoned the former president of Israel, who was found guilty and convicted on a rape charge. He's just gone to prison. You can say, I can tell you anything you want in Israel, as you can in this country. I can say, and I do, anything I want about the Cameron Liberal Democrat coalition. I know that at no point is somebody going to come knocking at my door. I know that at no point am I going to be unable to report from Britain or unable to report from Israel. But, and I give you the example of an Arab-Israeli journalist, Khaled Abu Tomin. It's not the same in the Palestinian areas, and it's not the same across the rest of that region. Khaled Abu Tomin gave the example, just finished this recently, of a British journalist who was with him once in the West Bank, who had once in the 1980s written an article very critical of Arafat. The crowd in the cafe recognised him, somebody recognised him. The crowd started to gather, and Khaled Abu Tomin had to get the British journalist out the back door to prevent a lynching. Now, the fact is, if you are reporting from totalitarian societies and totalitarian structures, yes, you are very careful about what you say, because you don't get back in. Sometimes you don't get out. If you're reporting from free states, I tell you, it's so much easier. And at the heart of that fact is the fact is the reason.
Discrimination against Arabs in Israel. Could you tell them about that?
Thank you, Douglas Murray.
Very happy to refute that when I have time. Thank
I would like to...
I'd add one other one to that, maybe, which is the Mohammed al-Dura case. The press is very, very concerned about what it runs in this conflict. First of all, because it knows what strong emotions are whipped up around the world by the release of footage. The alleged murder of Mohammed al-Dura, a small Palestinian boy, was filmed by France 2 television. It was one thing that spurred an intifada to occur. In a trial that finished in Paris only 2 years ago now, France 2 was shown to have messed up the footage, to have manipulated the footage, and it seems from the results of the trial in Paris that very many people died, as a result of a piece of forged footage. So there are very good reasons why the press don't like to show certain things.
I'm sorry about this because I've seen something on BBC on August when he was even criticizing David Cameron when he said the prison camp of Gaza. Israel is, yes, they have pulled out of Gaza, they've taken all the citadels that were occupying Gaza, but yet they've continued to occupy Gaza. You control the sea, you control the air, you control the land. So how come you have disengaged from Gaza? How come you have left Gaza and you are taking control of all the border points? You are allowed every single community and every kind of food we get in Gaza should be processed by Israel. Israelis are the ones who tell us in Gaza since 2005 what kind of food we shall eat.
There's just so many mistakes coming up that it's sort of hard to know where to start. But look, quickly, first of all, of course, you didn't hear from the other side that 40% of the population of Israel come from Arab countries from which they're expelled or have to flee from the beginning of the state. You didn't hear about that.
Well, I had no chance. I wanted to answer that.
We've got such selective things coming from the other side. Quickly, on that. First of all, Gilad Shalit was kidnapped and is we don't even know where. We don't even know if he's still alive. We know that people who go through the legal process in Israel, that yes, people are imprisoned. Yes, as any state has the right to imprison people who threaten that state. Whether you have the right to go to another state's territory, kidnap people, and then keep them in hiding is another question. Obviously, you don't have the same problem with that. Just quickly on this thing about Gaza. Look, when Israel disengaged from Gaza, the Palestinians made a fatal error. They made the error of not taking the opportunity they had to show that they wanted to live in peace with Israel. Because the moment, and look, for those of us who want a peaceful solution to this, with a Palestinian state and an Israeli state, this is an important point to make. It's the single biggest stumbling block. When Israel, against the Israeli government, against the wishes of many of its people, traumatically for the country, forced people out of their own homes in the Gaza, they did so because they thought that if they gave the land up to the Palestinians, they would get peace. But they didn't. They got rockets. Hundreds and then thousands of rockets landing on Israeli territory. If the Palestinians in the Gaza had not fired those rockets, there would be no wall, there would be no blockade.
Gaza was due to have more than 600 to 700 to 800 of the trucks of primary and secondary communities on a daily basis. But since the siege, we get much less than this. I hope you speak in details about that. Regarding what is happening in the West Bank as part of this question, I just invite every one of you to go into the West Bank and you will experience this suffering. When you go from one checkpoint to another checkpoints, more than 400 to 600 checkpoints, fixed checkpoints and literal checkpoints. And we hear the Israelis that said, as part of the peace process, they've removed something. They removed something, and then the other day they will find the Israeli soldiers coming with their patrols taking another checkpoint. Indeed, what is happening in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip is showing how Israel is a country above law. This country is not abiding by any international law. This country has refused for long years, the UN Security Council resolutions, and it has refused also the General Assembly and its resolutions that have affirmed in the UN Security resolutions on many issues. I don't want to be limited, but the Israelis have refused all these resolutions. I don't want to speak more about this. Maybe we'll jump into other points later on. Thanks.
Thank you. With all the dastardly tricks us employees of the Zionist superstructure are capable of, I didn't know that we could also conjure Mars out of thin air. The point I made, I think, on the BBC program you're referring to, was that there is something very strange about describing the Gaza in the way that David Cameron did, given that, among other things, the standard of living among Gazans is higher than most parts of Turkey, than in most parts of the rest of the Arab world. I think that's worth noting at the very least. And it shows the shame which you can see in any Arab country to bring something like a decent economy to these countries, instead of running them as crime syndicate family dictatorships, as most of them are. Look, just very quickly, one of my opponents was annoyed that I sniggered when he said that he agreed that Israel had the right to exist. I snigger because it's about the lowest thing you can say about something. If we were, say, discussing Pakistani politics, something I'm interested in, and talking right out a certain amount, Pakistan was created as a state in the same year as Israel. But say we were having a discussion tonight about Pakistani politics, who are you in favour of, who you prefer, which party, which president, and say somebody said that, I'd like to announce, I think Pakistan has a right to exist. You'd laugh at him, you'd think, what a maniac. That's been a defunct question for decades. It doesn't help at all that you happen to think that a state has a right to exist. Oh, great, well, I agree with Pakistan's right to exist. Excellent, that gets us a long way forward in the discussion. And so I don't know why people do it this way. The reason they do it, as the gentleman from the other side showed, was that again and again, we don't even have rockets now. We have so-called rockets. So-called rockets, a particular new type of rocket that doesn't have the same effect, doesn't kill you if it lands on your head, doesn't cause the casualties they cause. Look, the reason why you are hearing such poor stuff from our scientists is the following. They are not telling you the basic fact about what is happening on the ground. We're told that the Israeli army likes to, in Operation Cast Lead, bomb schools and hospitals. Do you think, or at least let me know, no, you may in this hall, why do you think it is that the Israelis went and bombed hospitals and schools, which on a couple of occasions, yes, missiles landed on them? Why do you think that was? There was a reason. It wasn't just a Jewish bloodlust for blowing up hospitals, okay? It was because the Hamas, which have been ruling the Gaza as a dictatorship for the last few years and still have cancelled the next elections, and nobody on the outside has mentioned that the Hamas will not have any more elections. They won't do the PA's elections in July. They said they're not interested in that. They're a one-vote, one-party, which murdered the other Palestinian party's members in the Gaza. You have to regard this as being important. If a state is being run by a terrorist group and murders the other people in the state, shoots them in the back and throws them off buildings, if they're Fatah Palestinian members, that is of some significance. And yes, the Hamas have a crucially different role in the world than the Israeli government or most democratic governments. Because the Israeli government spent, as this government would in this country if rockets were landing, not so-called rockets were landing on a regular basis, they would build bunkers for people to be in. They would build early warning systems for missiles. They would do all of these things. The difference between a good, legitimate, democratic government and the Hamas is that the Hamas uses schools as arms dumps. They do what the Hezbollah did in Lebanon. I saw it myself. They build an arms dump and then they put a school on the top of it. Do you honestly not know this? Do you not see it? Finally.
Show us.
Finally.
Show us, man.
There are plenty of examples.
First of all, Hamas established democratic elections. So Israel went to war with a democratic elected government. I'll come back to your latter point. Secondly, how would you justify Israeli ultra-Orthodox Jewish settlements inside the occupied territories of the West Bank?
Firstly, your question on the Hamas. Oh, look, this is worth focusing on for a second because Muslim Brotherhood, obviously, with Hamas as a wing, have big intentions in the region. So it's worth looking at what they have done so far, where they have got power. We may have a different standard of what constitutes a legitimate democratic government. I don't think that seizing power after an election in a coup where you kill your political opponents, murder them, and then never have another election is a democracy. I just don't think it is. Don't think it counts. One vote once doesn't count in my mind. The Hamas are, I have to say this, the biggest stumbling block of peace between the two parties. Because there are now three parties, and you have the possibility of a three-state solution, which I think is a very unhappy result, where you have the Palestinian Authority governing the West Bank, the State of Israel, and then a Hamas state in the Gaza. I think that's a very bad outcome. I think it's principally a terrible outcome for the people, the Palestinian people. I think secondarily it's a terrible outcome for Israel, because it doesn't have a negotiating partner in that part of the world. On the settlements issue, Look, there's a lot of difference of opinion on this, but I'll express mine. I don't want any more settlements. I think that they should roll back a number, quite a lot. I think that the final settlement between Israel and the Palestinian peoples in the West Bank will not be the 1967 borders. I think it will be something which allows some settlements to remain, some of the large ones. There will be a compromise on others. Effectively, most people know this is the future of it. There's the people who dream of 67 borders and things. It's not going to happen. But there is an additional thing on it which is worth mentioning. A gentleman referred to it in the question earlier. We should ask ourselves why it is that it has pretty much been decided by the outside world that if the Palestinian state does come into existence, as we hope it does, in the West Bank, that it will be free of Jews. This is a serious question we have to ask ourselves, to ask the region. Why is it that an Israeli family couldn't continue to live in their house in a Palestinian-run state? And when you consider that, you get to the root of part of this problem. Look, my observation would be the following. Anyone who says to you this is simple is a liar. It's not going to be simple, but it is achievable. And I would put it in the following way. In our lifetime, we will be able to see, perhaps even in the next 10 years, we'll be able to see what I think the of the panel are united in wanting, which is, as I say, the creation of a legitimate Palestinian state. Now, most, I think, if not all, there are some. I agree that every single democracy there's some whack jobs. No doubt about it. You can always find one in America, you can always find one in Britain, you can always find one in Israel. But most of the mainstream, the whole of the mainstream of Israeli politics recognizes that at some point in the near future a Palestinian state has to be encouraged and allowed to go ahead. Now, the problem for Israel, the problem for peace, is the following. They have a serious problem with finding a legitimate negotiating partner. And since the so-called election of Hamas, this has become a lot harder. Hamas, nobody's mentioned it yet, but it should be mentioned. Hamas, in its founding charter, is dedicated to the annihilation of the Jewish state. It is very, very hard to talk niceties with people who want to annihilate you. Very, very hard. Very hard to talk particular border issues or taxation issues or local council business if somebody's big picture desire is the annihilation of your peoples. So, there is a big obstacle to peace, a very big obstacle, and it is the fact that a very large number of Palestinians and a certain proportion of their leadership, most obviously the Hamas, cannot allow this Palestinian state to go ahead because they have to allow the Jewish state to exist alongside it, and they cannot make that leap. It is a tragedy. I have to tell you, it is a tragedy because what is possible is so within reach. But as long as the Palestinians have Hamas, a terrorist organization, claiming to represent a group of people, the Israelis can never sit down with them. And so, as I say, the will, I believe, on Israel's side is there. And they pretty much know what the final resolution of this conflict would look like. But we have to ask whether the same willingness sits on the side of the Palestinians. And I think the answer there is far more troubling.
To say that it's, within this short debate, it was the hardest for me to debate Mr. Murray, but he was the easiest to debunk in terms of the allegations and the lies he said within all this debate. He was speaking about Hamas and having no partner, but he should go back some years back, when Hamas was not in the power, when Yasser Arafat was negotiating with you, when Abu Mazen was negotiating with you in an Annapolis agreement, and you have a from that. You didn't speak about Oslo Accords and about Netanyahu when he came after Rabin was killed, after Beres, and he didn't do anything. He didn't pull out from many cities he was due to do. Hamas was not there. Why you didn't make peace? That's a simple question. Because simply, Israel is not interested in peace. Having lived in the Middle East, having experienced all these traumas, me, my family, and everyone around me, I don't think that will be a very close solution. I'm very pessimistic about that. Israel is neither interested in a one-state solution because this would bring it down. The demographic balance would go for the Palestinians. Israel would never accept this. About two-state solution, it would never be implemented because Israel has stolen all the land in the West Bank. There is nothing to negotiate about even. The solution that maybe, jokingly, that would be accepted by Mr. Murray, and he's working, as you know, for the Cohesion Center for this integration. I call it integration. He might accept to bring some more, let's say, 7 million Muslims, Palestinians, bring those in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, those in the refugee camps, bring them here in Britain, and through his center, he will have some very creative and philosophical ideas to deal with. Because I see, practically speaking, Israel is not interested in the way those people should be consulted. They should go back if they want, or they should be compensated if they want. Seeing all the peace process and all these rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds of negotiations, I could clearly tell you that Israel is not interested in peace. If they are interested in peace again, why they didn't make it with Arafat? Why didn't make it with Bashar al-Assad, for example? There's no Hamas in Syria. Why they didn't give up the Golan Heights for Syria? This shows that Israel is not interested in peace with any party. Israel knows that peace means we have to give up lands, and Israel is not ready to give up lands. Thanks.
I'm so sorry, but it'd be very, very quick. The Oslo Accords, if you would like to come back, I'll cede my time. Just very quickly, the Oslo Accords didn't happen that way. At Oslo, Arafat, who had been a terrorist who had been trying to annihilate, after all, the Jewish state for his whole adult life, Arafat was offered things that I think now are not going to be on the table, sadly. But at Oslo, he was offered, among other things, he was offered 98% of what he wanted. And among other things, he was offered a division of Jerusalem, which I think is not a desirable thing. But he was offered all of this. What did Arafat do? He did what Arafat always did. He walked away. He missed the opportunity. This is a total misreading of history. And as for this issue of expulsion, which state in the world in recent decades has been the one who's expelled most Palestinians? Does anyone know? Kuwait. After the 1990 invasion by Iraq, there was only one authority government in the world stupid enough to back Saddam Hussein, and that was, of course, Yasser Arafat, who never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And as a result, when the Kuwaiti government got its state back, it expelled every Palestinian from Kuwaiti territory. Now, pardon me, but if we're hearing 6 decades on all of this stuff about the right to return to the 1940s, why not them? There's a reason. Because when Israel does it, it interests certain people.
As I earlier said, it was the hardest to debate, but again the easiest to debunk. He just told us some mistakes when he said that an Oslo agreement that with 99% of the land were offered to Arafat. That's a lie, man. Could you tell them what happened? This was not happened in Oslo. This happened, according to the Israelis, in Camp David, when Barak and Clinton were in the office. So you've told us mistakes. This shows us that we should not believe in your view and what you say, because you tell us mistakes, man.
Okay, is anyone from the...
I hope I didn't rant to rave tonight. I led by the other side. I tried not to. But let me just, without ranting or raving, answer some of the points that came up. The Louis Theroux program was answered. I don't know, I just don't think that's a useful guide to things. The last Louis Theroux program I saw was about Paul Daniels. He came out in a pretty bad light, but I don't think that means that all magicians or all Brits are represented by Paul Daniels in it. I mean, come on, let's at least talk about the reality and the history that's going on. You just heard from the previous speaker, a classic example, by the way, of what I'm going to attribute good motives to him. I'm going to be benevolent and assume that he's speaking without any ill intent. But what you've just heard then, in that case, is a classic example of bad history from somebody who's had to live in a totalitarian society. I was in Egypt a few months back, and I saw a great example of this. When there's the 8th of October city, and there's an 8th of October road, and I said to an Egyptian friend, "What's all this 8th of October business going on?" He said, "He's a very, very educated guy. Oh, that's because of our victory over the Israelis." I went, "Your what?" "Yeah, it's our victory over the Israelis." "When was that?" I had to say, no, the Israelis beat Egypt." "Really? I didn't know that." The fact is that if you live in a society which controls what you think, you can come out with real crap. Quickly, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka hasn't come up tonight, but I would love to know if there's any society here or anyone else is doing something about we're too critical or not critical enough of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, when it put down its terrorist problem with Tamil Tigers more than a year ago, massacred tens of thousands of people. The press were kept out. The press didn't moan about it. They just stayed away. Well, that's how some states operate. It's not how Israel operates. But you do, again, have to ask yourself, why this constant focus on what Israel does in this? The fact is that Israel, the land that Israel is on, is a too much promised land. It's been promised by too many, I believe, fake deities, too many people through fake religious books. And the fact is, if you read the history of that land, it's a terrible, terrible thing. Too many people think that God tells them to settle there. And so there's a God problem, a God congestion problem in the area. I think the best way this is sorted out is to take God out of it, take out divine claims, because they're all counter to each other. We've heard a lot about history, or a bit of it anyway. And we can always dispute history. But let's just look for a second about the future. The future, as I see it, will be, as I've said repeatedly, a Palestinian state will be created, and I hope it is. And I hope that it has international support. But it can, I repeat, only be created if it recognizes that an Israeli state with a Jewish identity also exists alongside it. That remains now, as it has been for years, the biggest stumbling block. And one quick thing, thank you. The reference that has been made repeatedly to the international law. I mean, now I don't know. I just don't like this view of history and the view of the future. That instead of armies and so on, we'll just parade international lawyers to sort out all problems. I mean, it works up to a point, but there are also things that are extra legal problems that lawyers can't deal with. There are problems when the people's security is threatened, when lawyers aren't the answer, and the international community, very quickly, and the UN is the reason for Israel to feel very concerned. Because since 1975, its policy has been anti the existence of the state. That is a problem, and that is one of the things that's going to stop.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Okay, the question is that I wonder where you actually get your facts, because what you say and what I read here does not make
Where do you
sense.
get your facts? Well,
Very valid question. Very, very good.
I get them where I think you, and I urge you to get them, which is from a number of sources. First of all, read as much history as you can. Don't read biased one-sided accounts of history from any side. From any
No, I'll ask, where do you get them from?
Answer.
The sun.
But first of all, I get them from reading a lot of history. Secondly, from reading a lot of current affairs. And thirdly, by travelling a lot and by speaking with a lot of people as a journalist. Now look, the thing you've just read from, is that the Palestine?
It doesn't matter where it's from. The figures is from UN.
It's an interesting source. Is it the
The
Palestine
figures are from
Is it the
UN.
Palestine Telegraph?
It doesn't matter where
Is
it's
it the
from.
Palestine
It could be
Telegraph?
from my head. The
Can you
figures
just tell me,
are
is it
from
the
UN.
Palestine Telegraph?
No, now tell me. Tell me.
we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next question.
But if it's the Palestine Telegraph, this is interesting.
We are not a
If the gentleman doesn't want to tell you what his source is,
In which case, I will assume that it is the source which he doesn't want to tell you all. Find out about.
Ask the question. Please go.
It's regarding what Douglas Murray started with about, you quoted Ahmadinejad and about the annihilation of Israel. Ahmadinejad talks about the annihilation of Israel, whereas would you not think that the actual policies of Israel over the last number of decades have actually been targeted at annihilating the Palestinian community? So, for example, settlement expansion, land grab, the siege on Gaza, the checkpoints which prevent people from getting jobs, freedom of movement, restricting education, the Palestinian refugee situation, which Lamy mentioned. Is that not actual annihilation? And yet, I've heard you a number of times quote Ahmadinejad and talk about Iran and thinking about Hamas, yet you seem to have an allergy to actual facts on the ground.
I can
I'll tie into that, but the other thing that you mentioned in your opening statements, both of these are very ironic points because you talked about propaganda.
Okay, can we let him answer them one at a time?
Well, you can do them both at once.
No, because there are lots of people who want to ask questions. We're not going to have enough
It's a very
time.
brief point
So
about
can you please, Mr. Murray, please.
It's about propaganda. Just a quick point on propaganda.
Okay, no, sorry, we can't let that. We have other people just wasting time for everyone else. I'm really sorry. We're not going to do things based on that. And maintain to a certain order. What you are doing is disrespectful to all the other students who want to hear the questions. You're wasting everyone's time. Please, Mr. Murray.
Thank you. I hope we can speak afterwards and I'll answer the second part then, in private or whatever. The question on Iran, it's a straightforward one. If the Iranian, as I say, President, Supreme Leader and others say they want to annihilate the state of Israel...
They never said that, Douglas.
Okay,
they never
please,
said
please, let the speaker finish. It's not going to be very disrespectful.
There's always someone who pretends they don't say what comes out of their mouth. The wipe from the face of time, whatever your particular transliteration you want to
you have sufficient knowledge of English. I mean, you're an English speaker, you can understand.
Your fellow students who want to listen to this answer.
Is the following. Is that whilst pursuing nuclear weaponry, that is certainly something which Israel should be concerned about. Secondly, on the issue, no, I don't think there's anything like an annihilation here. Look, it's referred already that Israel is a nuclear state, okay? Mordechai Vanunu, the whistleblower, went to prison for revealing this many decades ago, as this country imprisons people who release our secrets and our intelligence information. Now look, let's just be real about this. If Israel wanted to annihilate the Palestinian people, it could, but it doesn't. It doesn't. It's simply a fact on the ground. Go to the West Bank, go to Israel, speak to Palestinians in Israel. Is it annihilating them? Or is it giving them all the rights of every other citizen?
What's the
It's
Jewish
the latter.
oath of loyalty? What is the Jewish oath of loyalty then?
This is
How
a
is that free?
fantasy concept. That Israel is engaged in annihilation. And by the way, it is said for a particular reason. A very particular reason. I have to highlight this very quickly. It is always said because the desire of people in Europe and elsewhere at the moment seems to be lending towards the idea that now the Jews are doing it. Now the Jews are doing genocide. It's such an attractive thing for Europeans to argue. You see, even the Jews can do genocide. No, this is a fantasy.
Okay, but let's...
You were laughing at the data. I have the data for you here.
Firstly, I repeat, even the UN's own data, which you can look back at like later, shows that living standards in Gaza are higher than in many other parts of the region. Secondly, let's just get back to the facts. Why is it that there are checkpoints in and out of Gaza? Why is it that Israel is sending in truck after truck of food? And why isn't there free flow? Because, just to tread back over it again, every time there is a free flow from Gaza into Israel, Israel gets suicide bombers. So if there were no suicide bombers coming in, then the aid and so on could be better. It would be trade, not aid. And then secondly, a very, very important point. The gentleman who just spoke said 60 years of occupation. Is this, we ask ourselves what I think most of us on the panel want, which is a carving out of a Palestinian state within this? No. 60 years of occupation. You mean the whole of Israel is an occupation? Do you not?
The whole of Palestine.
Yeah. Do you not think that?
The whole of Palestine is an occupation.
Yeah. You believe, in other words, there is no Jewish state in the right.
No, Jews can live in Palestine, but Israel, they invaded Palestine. That's what they did.
Illegal.
And South
We're going to